A new book tells the stories of remarkable women from the North Country and their incredible contributions to the region's history. We sit down this week with the author, Dan Ladue. Here to talk about their accomplishments that span 3 centuries of history in northern New York is the author who has brought all their stories together. Dan Ladue, welcome. It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here. What made you decide to write this book?
This was not the initial intention. The initial intention was to write a book about people who have made a legacy in this area. And then as I went forward, I realized there was a large group of women that had their own story. And women are often undersung. They're not as celebrated as men are. And I feel very strongly that these women, many of them have been forgotten. In small niches they're known, but widely they have essentially been forgotten.
How did you choose the 25 women for this book?
Well, that was not easy actually, because it's very easy to find a lot of men, but I had to do a lot of searching with the women. And I did have some help with the Historical Association and friends and colleagues, former colleagues, who provided me with other names. And I think as I started to write, then other people said, oh, have you thought about? So.
You were the guest speaker at a dedication ceremony just a few weeks ago. The Webb Island footbridge over the Saranac River, well known in Plattsburgh, was renamed in honor of Thelma Douglas, who was a longtime physical education teacher in the Plattsburgh City School District for more than 30 years, and one of the women you write about in your book. And at the dedication ceremony that day, you said you chose Thelma as one of 2 women to put at the beginning and the end of your book. Why did you choose the 2 women you did and construct your book that way?
Well, their lives couldn't be, their lives were so radically different. Thelma could never have imagined the life that Lucretia Davidson had, and Lucretia, it was out of her imagination that any woman would have the kind of life that Thelma had. Thelma is the only woman I actually knew who is in this book. I know her through the church that I was attending at that time. Thelma came of age at a time when women were gaining prominence in the country. She was born into suffrage. She never actually was part of the suffrage movement. At the age of 18, I suppose, she was able to vote. She went to college because of many women before her who just said, we want a piece of the pie, and we're getting it. And at some points I thought, oh, there were other women I could have used, but I'm still very comfortable with Thelma. I mean, she had a lasting legacy in Plattsburgh. Beartown Ski Center is her baby. She is the one who went to her friend Mal Colleen to say, we need to put skis on people in Plattsburgh. And she was involved in Beartown right to the very end. Beartown is a remnant of a homegrown effort on a large group of people to put skis on people in Plattsburgh.
And she took students on hiking expeditions in the Adirondacks to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, especially young girls. Long before Title IX, Thelma Douglas really stood up for young women to get them involved in sports and outdoor activities and recreation.
She did. She would organize what was then known as play dates. I think today we would call those field days. And they were it was an attempt, and it was a very successful attempt, to bring girls from the different schools together to play sports. And I was able to speak to people who were influenced by that. She started a hiking club at Plattsburgh High School. And I would imagine that there are 46ers out there who got their passion through Thelma.
You touch on a number of teachers in your book, a number of them educators. Marcia Brown was an educator, a teacher, a principal who went on to do great things.
There was a time when only 2 people in the world knew what Marcia Brown accomplished. Marcia is not a Plattsburgh resident. She came here in 1873, I think, as the ladies principal of the then Plattsburgh Academy. In 1875, she moved. But she had quite an impact locally. She visited the poorhouse, perhaps in January of 1874, and wrote this an eloquent article in the newspaper saying the horrors that she had seen. And almost immediately, this group of women, they were middle to upper middle class in Plattsburgh, all had influential husbands, and they banded together and they opened the Home for the Friendless within a very short period of time. The Home for the Friendless is still here in the form of Behavioral Health Services North. It has morphed from one thing to the other. But Marcia left here. She ended up in Pittsfield, Mass. The paper trail ended. And I thought, I kind of gave up on it after a while. And then I returned to it saying, I'm going to try once again. So bingo, I land this Marcia Brown with an E school in Malden, Massachusetts. It's now in the Historic Register. I contact the Malden Public Library, and the librarian says to me, oh, this is just too weird. She says, nobody has ever asked about this woman, but a woman working on her doctoral thesis in Brazil is also inquiring. It was simultaneously. Anyway, Carmen and I are now friends, and between the two of us, we were able to piece together that Brazil transitioned from a monarchy to a republic in 1888. They got a group of Presbyterians who were sort of like missionaries, but academic missionaries, to model the republic's school system after the American school system. But they needed more people, so they contacted what we would call a headhunter today, who said, I know the perfect woman. Because by then, Marcia was the principal of the school that would ultimately become named after her. And doesn't she pick up and go? She was the impetus carrying the philosophies of Horace Mann from Boston area to Brazil. She is the Horace Mann of Brazil.
And Horace Mann, a well-known education reformer in Massachusetts.
Educated under Horace Mann's philosophy. The fact that you had a teacher who went to college, that you were in 5th grade. Because prior to that, it was really a one-room schoolhouse.
And so many of the women that you profile couldn't go to college, weren't allowed to go to college back in those days, weren't accepted in college, and yet made tremendous strides and did tremendous things. One of them was Lucy Taylor Hobbs. She persisted. She wanted to get into college. She wanted to become a dentist and tried 2-3 times in Ohio to get into dental school and finally succeeded.
She did. Lucy is actually claimed by Clinton and Franklin County. She was born in Clinton County, but grew up in Franklin County, went to the Franklin Academy. What she wanted to be was a doctor. And luckily she had the opportunity to live, went out as a teacher, and she was living with the doctor's family. Her interest then went into dentistry. And so she applied to dental school. Well, of course, she was rejected. She was a woman. And then she tried again, and she tried again. And by this point, she was actually doing dental work, because in those days, barbers did dental work. And you could just learn how to be a dentist. I mean, I wouldn't want to go to one of them. And she actually excelled because she had small hands. A lot of these women had to have help from men. And that's not being misogynist. So anyway, she finally applies again to Ohio with the help of a group of men who basically said, you have to take this woman. And bingo, she graduates in 1867. She is the first female in the world to receive a Doctor of Dentistry degree.
Out of all these women that you researched, which of these stories were your favorites?
Oh, I think Marcia Brown. Marcia, the research involved with that was just so fascinating as it unfolded.
Just real briefly, you also tell the stories of 3 women, the Michigan Mavericks, and one of the most popular foods in Plattsburgh, and these, we're going to guess, are the women behind the Michigans ending up in Plattsburgh.
Right.
You are working on other projects.
I am.
Now. Yeah. And some of those projects are other books, but you also are passionate, as are other folks, in Plattsburgh in particular. There is a special type of grass that grows at City Beach, near City Beach, and there are people in the community who want to protect and preserve because it's such a rare type of grass. And a lot of folks may not have heard about this, may not be aware that this is happening.
It's known as Lake Champlain beach grass, It is very genetically similar to the standard American beach grass, but it's not. There's a genetic difference. There are only 5 places in the world where it grows. One of them is on the Plattsburgh City Beach in the last extent of sand dunes. There is a movement to make people aware.
And what's the next step in trying to do this?
Well, the next step would be to have something like the DEC come in and say, we need to protect this. It does not have protected status.
And as the city talks about developing that area, is there an urgency to get this recognized and to raise the concerns about this?
I have a lot of concerns about it. I would love to see that entire area protected as forever wild. I mean, we're not within the blue line, but that would be my great wish.
Your book is Bold and Courageous, 25 North Country New York Women and Their Exceptional Contributions, published locally by Bloated Toe Publishing. Folks can go to the Bloated Toe website to find out how to purchase your book, or they can also go to bookstores in the Plattsburgh area. Dan Ladue, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It's been a real pleasure.